question to each of them, and I'll start with Carol maybe, is to really just get a sense of, Carol, could you just tell us in a few words something about yourself and what you've been doing just in the last couple of weeks?
Okay then. My name is Carol Burns. I was brought up in the northeast, went to University of Manchester, which was very formative, and now live in Leeds. And I am a mother and a grandmother, and I've just finished full-time work, working with older people. And in the last couple of weeks, I've been doing a lot of looking after my grandchildren, but also supporting some work that's happening through Pax Christi to try and find out a little bit more about Catholic conscientious objectors who were brought up who lived in the West Yorkshire area, and it's a bit of a detective story. So that's what I've been doing.
Emma, tell us a little bit about you.
I'm from Preston, London, and going to St. Bede's High School in year 10, just starting my GCSE. I'm living with my dad, my little sister, my little dog, and we're sort of going to a bit of a busier year. Hopefully a bit more piecework, working hard, get ready for my exams, and been in the Young Peace Journalist for I think 2 years, and I've written an interview with them, and hope to do some more work on this year.
Emma.
My name is Emma Atherton. I was born in Wigan. I have been involved with Pax Christi maybe since I was about 14, when I applied for a competition with Pax Christi at school and got invited to Casa Pace in Italy, and I've never been able to get away since. Happily, sorry, Pat, that was a bad joke. And then when I studied Peace Studies at the University of Bradford, and after that I went to work for Faiths for Change. You may have heard Annie earlier speaking. I went to work for Faiths for Change, and I currently work at Support for Wigan Arrivals project, where we support asylum seekers and refugees in Wigan. I coordinate volunteers and group work there, and in the past couple of weeks I've been doing walks up to Hay Hall, which is a nice place to walk in Wigan, with the refugees and asylum seekers that I work with. I just got a group of Eritrean lads who have decided that they want to volunteer at Hay Hall in the kitchen garden, so I'm very happy about that.
Great. And for most of us, there was an event or something we read or something we've seen about that kind of brought us on board. I'm sure all of you have your own story. So I want to ask our three here, was there an event or something that happened in the world or something you experienced that was the trigger for you, that kind of switched a light on for you and said, oh, I want to get involved in that? Whoever wants to start that.
So the first thing that comes to mind is really the G8 summit. I think it was in Edinburgh in 2003? 2005? I was like 10, 11, I think, I don't remember. But it was to make property history, and it was all the big protests in Edinburgh against the Iraq War as well, all of that kind of time. Was basically the Iraq War was what triggered me into this, and my mum and my dad have been very big influences on me. I remember my dad pulling over the car on Springfield Street around the corner and talking to some lads who he saw. He said, who are these? Turns out they were refugees from Iraq and Afghanistan, and he invited them around, and they would always just invite people around that they chatted to for dinner, so I always had a very interesting household, and they influenced me to be involved.
Trigger.
So it'd have to be about maybe when I started St. Bede's, getting involved in the action group, which is several groups within one that do projects. And at the time it was very, very small. There was about 10 pupils. And the youth worker who was coming in had worked with my mum when she was at high school, so I kind of got pulled in from there. And in year 8, I decided to, so 2 years ago, my RE teacher called me and he said, I've heard about this project and I think you'd be brilliant for it. He said, I'd like you to apply for it. I didn't really know what it was at the time. I applied and a few days later I got a reply. It was the Young Peace Journalist. Within about 3 months of getting all that process started, doing the training, the weekends and all the meetings, I interviewed Mohammed, who was staying in Lancaster at the time from Aleppo, and hearing his story and being able to empathise with him and understand what he'd been through triggered me to then start writing more, speaking to more people. We had Mohammed come to our church, speak to the community there, and people more and more have started to understand more, and it's been really successful so far.
Could you just explain in a couple of minutes what the Peace Journalist Project is? Because I don't think people will know. Yeah.
Okay, so the Young Peace Journalist is through Pax Christi. It's an international project. People from all over the world, sort of my age to people in the very early 30s, doing his work, so interviewing refugees and asylum seekers and spreading their story, publishing it online in local newspapers, magazines. We've got people, I think there's 2 of us from the UK, there's people from America, New Zealand, I think they've got a few in maybe Croatia, Italy, those sorts of places, and we've all come together to write and try and spread the story and awareness of refugees, and the groups are getting bigger, there's more and more people coming in, and it's been really successful.
Great, that's great. Just fills us in a bit. Thank you. Carol, what about you?
I always find this question really hard to remember. Because I was born in 1956, so I'm 62, so much of my formation was in the late 60s and early 70s. And I suppose I can pick 2 or 3 things now when I look back. I was fortunate to be involved in Young Christian Students when I was at school, and that was incredibly influential in terms of a framework and a way of reflecting on the gospel. And then when I went to university in the mid-70s, that was the time of campaigns around disinvestment from South Africa, independence for Zimbabwe, and all those things informed my thinking. And then when I moved to Leeds in 1977, I was fortunate that there was already a Justice and Peace Commission. As some of you may know, Leeds was the first Justice and Peace Commission. So all those sort of things built up to it. And then sort of more specifically around the peace thing, I'm sure some of you remember around that time and building up to kind of the early 80s, we were genuinely afraid that there was going to be nuclear war. We were really, really frightened. So maybe it started off as fear and then turned into action. And then someone around that time, I can't remember exactly, gave me a collection of Thomas Merton's writings on peace. Now, I hadn't heard of Thomas Merton. I didn't know about his history in terms of contemplation and spirituality. So I first came to Thomas Merton with his writings about peace. And he was the first person that I ever read who challenged the just war theory. So all those sort of things together, I suppose, helped to form me in the following decades.
Thanks, thank you. So I'm hearing some common threads. I'm hearing there's something here about almost being invited into it. Come and see. Come and see. Come and see. Your mum, somebody's friend, a group. And it's that first entry, you know, and we all probably have a come and see moment or experience. And then something about other people, bringing other people around us. The friendship group through the young journalists, the student group, refugee, bringing people around us who form a kind of support, community, whatever, friendships, perhaps that's part of it. So from the kind of initial things that triggered each of you into this work, refugee experience of war, going back to the nuclear issues, more contemporary issues of stories of refugees. How has that initial interest, how would you say it's grown for you? What's it grown into for you? How are you kind of living that out today, maybe in a slightly different way? How has it taken a direction for you? If that makes sense.
Yes. So I live that out in my paid work. To be honest, I work for a charity. I chose to study peace studies because I had this sort of fear of being driven towards social justice. Like, oh, you got to do something. So I was like, okay, so I'm supposed to study, so I'll study something about social justice, and I'm supposed to work and earn money, so I'll try and do that in that field. But currently, last year I started studying the law, so that's really where I'm at now. I'm doing a law conversion course, so I've done that. I've started that part-time, and I guess that's where I'm at now. I'm thinking, so I'm interested in social justice. I just felt the law was a natural place to go with that. So I don't know, we shall see. Yes.
Carol.
Yes. I think in some ways just the same, but I suppose one of the other things I wanted to mention was I also feel fortunate to have had this early formation at the time of Vatican Council, at the Second Vatican Council, and that idea of the discerning the signs of the times, I think, has been really important to me. And so as different things develop, and so some of the nuclear stuff, which is still around but perhaps doesn't seem quite as fearful, although North Korea, has developed into work around the arms trade, but also now, I think, an increasing interest in what it means to live non-violently and what that means in our personal life, what that means in the way that we protest, how we are a sign of that approach to solving conflict and to looking at different ways of making our world a safe place, I think. So I think that's where I am.
And Ella, for you, in your work, your school, opportunities, what would you say for you?
It's difficult to know where to start, really. I suppose within the parish and doing work in school, there's always opportunities for a new project, always somewhere new to go, so it's hard to know where you end up. You just kind of goes from where you're at. Working with my dad doing the CAFOD work with the CAFOD reps for our parish, so we've been doing the Share the Journey project with the church, and sort of like working with the diocese and the deanery on those different projects. So that's been nice to be able to have a community of people who are all working together to try and make that happen. There's always things going on at school through the chaplaincy. The action group is so much more successful now. We have it's gone from about 10 students to 60 students packed on a Friday lunchtime. Students working together for action, whether it's with homeless people or obviously the refugee crisis. There's all sorts of different projects going on. Youth work outside of school. So still being influenced by my parents, like with Emma, it's always building up. So there'll be people doing more projects, more work, and it's getting more and more successful. We've been offered loads and loads of grants, so we've got thousands of pounds going into our projects at school, which is amazing. So we're just sort of looking at the minutes or the meetings, because obviously it's the start of our school year. We're looking to see where we can go, and hopefully by the end of the year manage to put the money that we've got from these grants and put them in projects to go into primary schools and I don't know, just go from there.
I think we'll all be employing Ella as project manager. Project managing going on there. All of you probably, you've indicated we start on our own with stories or with small groups, and we eventually realise that we want to try and bring other people on board. And all of you involved in peace and justice, you know, it's not easy bringing people with us into this kind of work. So I'm just interested in anything that you've found or anything from your own experience. Has there been anything that you think has actually worked in bringing other people with you into your interest, into your passion, so that you've found a way of sharing that with others, bringing it on board? And then a key question, does age matter? And by that I mean, do we need to work in age groups, old people, young people? And does age matter in the way we do our work? I know that's probably a naughty question. Does age matter? Anyone want to kick off with that?
So I'll start then with different. I haven't got any answer at all about how you bring people on, except that one of the things I was thinking about is it does sometimes, within church communities, it sometimes seems as though the environment has changed a lot, and I feel it's more, certainly in my experience, more receptive, because I can remember in the early 80s, you know, trying to get speakers, say, from Pax Christi, and our parish priest not wanting to have a speaker because it would cause too much conflict. Whereas now I myself have been going around parishes talking and trying to raise money for Pax Christi, for example. So in one sense, bringing people along, I mean, how much people are engaged. But my feeling is just to try anything you can. And I think you have to try different things in different contexts. So sometimes acts of witness are important, and we just have to, and we may not bring people along with us. But other times it might be doing something, you know, softly, like bidding prayers, or whatever it is. The thing that we're working on in the Leeds Pax Christi at the moment is we're going to do something on November the 10th called Remembrance is Not Enough, and we're trying to give the voices of people other than soldiers, including conscientious objectors, about their experience of the First World War. So it seems for me, it's been about trying to touch people in different ways according to where they are, because I do feel this is it's a journey, isn't it? It's very much a journey, and some of us were able to have opportunities quite early on in our life to start that journey when we're quite young. And for others, they'll start that journey or change their direction at different stages in their life, really. So for me, I haven't really got an answer. Do you want me to do, does age matter? Yes and no, of course, sit on the fence. I don't know what the two young women will say. I do sometimes feel that sometimes, because if it's a come and see invitation, then come and see from someone who you can identify with and recognise as a role model might be more appropriate. So maybe Errol will have more success in school than I would, where, you know, I'm the age of their grandmas, and depending on the relationship you have with your grandma, you know, you might not think that that was who you wanted to follow. So I think it depends. I'm not saying that young people obviously won't accept invitations from older people, and we all did when we were younger, but I think there is something about like to like in that way, really, and opening, people being open to hearing things, and perhaps they'd be more open from someone in their, roughly in their peer group, but not necessarily.
People didn't hear that. Age matters once you've turned 80.
I'm 80 next week.
Well, I'd have to say, with does age matter? It's quite a controversial question for lots and lots of reasons. You meet people my age that will always say no at the time. For me personally, the answer is no. I think that some of us, say for example, like people at different ages in the peace journalist group, always wanting to go for the same, always aiming for the same goal, which is just simply world peace. So I think that it should be easy enough for everybody to work together towards that. Whereas some older people and younger people say, no, I can't work with that different age group because of their type of experience is different to mine. Say, for example, my grandma, she's 65, she wouldn't have experienced the same things that I have, even though, I'm not saying 65 is on fine. It's a different experience, but as for people, to get people to sort of engage them and help them understand, like 2 years ago, before I met Mohammed or I started my youth journalist project, I really, really didn't know a lot about what was happening, and you think that you know, but then when you know, you just, you know. I had no idea, thinking about it now, I had no knowledge at all on what was happening until I started. And meeting Mohammed and being able to face him and listen to his story face on, and being able to empathise with him, his body language, everything, the way he was saying things, it's much easier to understand now what these people are really going through. And I don't think, even though the interviews that the people are writing are really powerful, I don't think that even then those interviews are powerful enough sometimes as actually speaking to the people and getting to really understand them. So with that, I think we've engaged so many people from with our church, and we took about 5 of my friends, I think, last June to Lancaster to the group where we've got the refugees on this, and they've got their own community there, people all from different backgrounds, different countries, but they're all refugees and asylum seekers, and they come together like one big family. It's obviously people cooking from different cultures for each other, like being able to share that, and I thought that was really nice. And in watching my friends being able to finally understand and experience for themselves, empathise with these people, what they've really been going through, is so much easier. So I'd say that experience is always a really great way of getting people involved and engaged, because then you start to understand and really know. I think that the media of false knowledge is really a big issue in getting people involved, because they just don't know.
Well, with regards to getting people involved, I guess that's kind of my job at the moment. So a volunteer coordinator. My job is to try and convince people to come and work for free, which I think is the best job in the world, because I get emails all the time, people saying, oh, I really want to help, I want to help people, but I think my key for getting people involved is to, number one, ask them, and then number two is to work with them. So I have a very flexible volunteer role descriptions at work. I get somebody in and I do a little interview with them, and I'll just ask questions about them and find out what they like, what they're good at, and then I'm like, oh, I wonder what else I wonder if there's something you could do with you and your skills. I wonder, is there anything you'd particularly like to do? So I guess empowering people to use the skills that they have for our and my clients' benefits. But yeah, so I just think ask people. I mean, the only reason I'm involved in any of this is because I was asked and because I was invited. I think like that's the biggest thing. You have to invite people. I think that's the key. And with regards to age groups, I think it's really important to work across age groups, because I have role models and they really help me to focus. Because I think, like, my age, I'm 25, I think it's hard. Everybody's so focused, on themselves. I I don't know what age you guys got involved in social justice, but I think when you're like 25, it's like you're thinking about, you know, setting up your home. You've got to put a roof over your head and all of that, and it's quite hard. You're hustling kind of thing. So yeah, for me, it's very important to have people of older generations to follow, and it's great to have people younger generations as well, you know, to inspire with the work that you're doing.
And then just one final question. Given what you're doing now, the work you're involved in for peace, social justice, refugees, challenging war, wanting to be more non-violent, what would you say when you look at the world, when you look outside there, what's the greatest threat to peace that you think we need to face today? Easy question.
I don't know. I found what Jenny was saying before really interesting about individualism, and I think probably that is the greatest threat to peace. You know, because only in my generation everyone's got depression and anxiety, you know, and I think it's because we're all we're all navel gazing, just looking at ourselves. Oh, life's so hard. And you know what makes your life easier? If you just decide to help other people instead, because then you think about yourself less. So I think individualism possibly would be the greatest threat.
I'd have to say, like I said before, false knowledge and the media, because people have a lack of knowledge, they don't understand, and people come in before they really do understand. I've met people that think that refugees are people that just want our money, our jobs, and it's really not. They're in really desperate situations. And I've spoken to people today, and they've also said there's people won't leave their homes unless they absolutely have to. I know I would not leave my home unless I absolutely had to, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people around here. You have your setup here, you've got your work, school, and friends and family, people you don't want to leave behind, things you don't want to leave behind. And there's just a lack of understanding on what people really go through and seeing what people see. We don't get that over here. We're so fortunate to have what we have. So I think that if people start speaking to people that have actually gone through the things that they have, rather than listening to people who think they know what people have gone through, just tell the story rather than tell it falsely. A lot of people just believe what they listen to in the news, and a lot of the time it's not true. I think really speaking to Mohammed and speaking to the other refugees that I've met, you gain an understanding, and then you really know what's true.
I suppose lots and lots of things, but one thing that comes to mind, and I probably would have said a different thing tomorrow, is fear. And I suppose I'm influenced by listening to, for example, the rise of the far right in Sweden, which was just on the radio this morning. And so that fear of the other, but that then has an underlying reason, doesn't it? And some of it's an analysis about those who have and those who have not, and feeling afraid of the other, but trying to kind of understand that and process that either within our own country or in different parts of the world, I think is some of the underpinnings. And some of the things that have been talked about is that when you meet people and when you have the experience, so we do have a challenge, don't we, to help people to have those different experiences so that they're not so afraid of the other, whatever that might be. And that does apply to our own local communities in this country and to people from different parts of the world.
Well, thank you, the three of you, for taking the risk of coming along today and joining the conversation. Also not quite knowing how the day was going to pan out because it's boom, 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 boom. It's a bit tough on all of us. So thank you very much, because it's not easy to come and, you know, engage at this level very personally, and thank you very much for doing that. And I think all we would say is, let's replicate these conversations where we can. It's not rocket science, is it? And yet we've got so much from one another in this conversation. So take away the idea, have these intergenerational conversations wherever we are. Thank you for listening so patiently.